It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show, show number 246. I'm recording on the 17th, this segment anyway, and I'm hoping the whole show goes out on the 18th because I have a special announcement from Andrew Seidel, who is an attorney with the FFRF. Big announcement, and I had to wait a day to get that out. But today, I am in a little bit of a mood. And so it seems like it's nice when I'm in a bit of a mood. The first thing I have to do is acknowledge that I fucked something up. In the last show, I started talking about taxes, which I do know some things about, but I do not claim to be an expert, and I proved it. So because I have the smartest audience of any podcast, I got emails, very nice, very polite, telling me that I had said something that was wrong, and they were right. And I'd like to say something like a politician where I misspoke would be a really politically correct way of saying it. But no, I fucked up, okay? I was wrong. I had it in my head wrong. I've said this wrong before. It was completely wrong. And it happens. I wish it didn't, but I make mistakes. I'm human. So here's the deal. What I talked about was stock dividends, and I said something along the lines of stock dividends will be added to your income and taxed at your marginal rate. So if your marginal tax rate is 28 or 30 or 35%, that's the tax rate you'll pay on the dividends. That's false. I'm sorry to say it's lower, which is great for most of the dividends. So I'm only talking about common dividends, ordinary dividends is the tax word, ordinary dividends. And there's two types primarily. I'm going to allow myself some wiggle room to miss something, but there's either qualified or non-qualified stock ordinary dividends. If they're qualified ordinary stock dividends, you will pay your capital gains tax rate, which could be either 0, 15, or 20%. For most people, it's going to be 15. Some of you on the lower income side, it might be 0, which is great, but it'd also be nice to make more money. Which, the funny thing is, this changed a while back, and I've been doing this long enough that it used to not be that way, and things change. And since I'm not a tax expert, I don't keep up on every little change in the tax law. But regardless, I was wrong. The really funny thing about this is it makes index funds just a little bit more better than managed funds, because one of the better ways, the more assured ways, one of the criteria you have to meet to become a qualified dividend is you have to own the stock for a period of time. And I'm going to do this off the top of my head. Let's say 60 days before plus or minus the ex-dividend date. So you can't just buy right before or right after the dividend date and sell it. So you have to own it for a while. Index funds generally own the vast majority of all the stocks they own, 90, 95, 98% all year, and they don't change. Some do. They make little adjustments to the index. But a managed fund is buying and selling stocks sometimes quite quickly, and some of those stocks will be bought and or sold around the ex-dividend date, making them non-qualified dividends, so you'll pay your marginal rate on non-qualified dividends. So in summary, if you're in index funds, and maybe even if you're in a regularly managed fund that doesn't have wildly high turnover, the majority of your stock dividends will be qualified, and you will pay rates your capital gains tax rates of 0, 15, or 20. And of course, all of this is as of January 2018. If the rules change randomly, well, then it's going to be something different if you're listening to this in the future. Another fun thing, our cat. I don't talk about our cat very much. We have an odd cat. One of its curiosities is it loves to eat plastic. It will eat those little twist ties that come around like a bag of bread, and it will eat those. So you gotta make sure those never end up on the floor. And it will also eat into plastic bags. Like you go to the grocery store and they put everything in plastic bags. It'll chew on those and get little pieces off and eat it. I don't understand it. Well, we found out our cat has a new oddity. We just cleaned the walk-in shower in the master bathroom. And a few minutes later, I find the cat sitting right at the edge of the shower, fucking huffing bleach fumes in the stand-up shower. And I had to pick the cat up, take her out of the bathroom, close the bathroom, sit her near an open window, and it's only about 20 degrees today, so she could kind of clear her head. But she was intentionally sitting there just kind of sucking down the bleach, the chlorine fumes. So, odd cat. Very, very odd cat. The other fun thing in the news today has to do with politics. And this is from a speech today, the 17th of January, so the day before you're probably listening to this, or a little farther back. Jeff Flake, who is a Republican senator from Arizona, gave a speech on the floor of the Senate where he really ripped Trump a new one. And I'm delighted by this. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, virtually everything, every time he's had a chance to actually do something and vote, he has sided with the GOP and Trump. So, it'd be nice if he actually did something with his power. But these quotes, there are some doozies. And it's at CNN, and I'm sure other websites, but CNN has 20 of the better ones. I'm going to hit a few of these. Number one, for without truth and a principled fidelity to truth and to shared facts, Mr. President, our democracy will not last. That's pretty direct, pretty strong. Another one, quote, it is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies, end quote. This is from a sitting senator who's retiring. But, I'd wish he'd do something about it. That one easy thing he could do is switch from Republican to Democrat. And if he and one other person do that, the Democrats could have a majority of the Senate and block a lot of the bullshit that Trump is trying to do. It's that easy. It's that close. But he doesn't do that. Yet, at least. He's going to retire, right, in a few months. Do something now. Another one of his lines, quote, the president has it precisely backwards. Despotism is the enemy of the people. The free press is the despot's enemy, which makes the free press the guardian of democracy, end quote. Absolutely delightful. But he doesn't stop there. Here's another one. When a figure in power reflexively calls any press that doesn't suit him fake news, it is that person who should be the figure of suspicion, not the press. And this is just absolutely amazing. Another one, no matter how powerful, no president will ever have dominion over objective reality. Oh, he's not pulling any punches. This is some stuff better than almost any Democrat has said. This is absolutely delightful. No, quote, no longer can we compound attacks on truth with our silent acquiescence. No longer can we turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to these assaults on our institutions. It goes on and on and on. Another one, to be very clear, to call the Russian matter a hoax, as the president has many times, is a falsehood. He's straight out acknowledging that there is a problem with Russia, which Fox News tells all of its listeners there's not a problem. And this is a country, Russia, that is our nemesis, I guess. And somehow Republicans and people who watch Fox News now love Russia, whatever. Number 16, I'm just picking randomly here. Every word that a president utters projects American values around the world. Yep, it sure does. Last one here. If we compromise the truth for the sake of our politics, we are lost. So that was Senator Jeff Flake, who is unfortunately still a Republican from the great state of Arizona. And it'd be delightful if he switches his party, but some very strong words from him about that. So we have that fun news today. And the last thing I have before we take a little break and get into the interview is about LexShares. And I did this for the podcast Habeas Humor. I was on their show, and not all of you are going to go listen to it, because if you're like me, you can only listen to so many shows in a day. I'm trying to get everything done. LexShares is kind of crowdfunding for lawsuits. If you're familiar with Kickstarter, where I could raise some money for some project or a surgery or something. Well, this is a way for people who want to sue to raise money to pay their attorney to actually go to court. So, very clever idea, I guess. And this organization, they go through all the plaintiffs that apply, and they pick out the best cases, the ones that are most likely to win. And of course, I have to ask myself, if they're the most likely to win, why aren't the attorneys doing them on contingent basis? Because if you're doing it on a contingent basis, you can make a lot of money as an attorney. And if you're that sure it's going to win, you just do that, and you don't have to get $1,000 or $10,000 or a couple $100,000 from random people on the internet. So that's kind of odd. The first thing you have to know about this, and it's a lot of investments, and you should be concerned anytime you see this requirement. It says that you have to be an accredited investor, and this is a very specific legal term that has real meaning. And if they don't verify that you're an accredited investor, then you should not be able to invest in this. And when there is a requirement that you're an accredited investor, you should understand and automatically read into that this is very, very risky. What is an accredited investor, you ask? And that's a great question. It is someone who has a net worth of at least $1 million, excluding your primary residence, and you make at least $200,000 a year for the last 2 years, or $300,000 combined if you are married. And the logic behind this is that if you have a bunch of money, you're smarter, or at least you understand investments. I have not found that to be true, but here is the rule. This is how rules are made, and it doesn't have to make sense. It's just what the rule is. And you can go to LexShares, and you can sign up, and you can contribute, donate, invest. I don't know what the right word is, money. And it goes through a brokerage firm called Wealth Forge Securities. To the best of my knowledge, LexShares and Wealth Forge Securities are related entities. I'm not 100% on that, but I think they are. And the LexShares is the name of the website, and you're actually buying a position ownership in a company called LexShares LLC. So you're making an investment in a company, and that investment is set aside to be for a specific legal case. So you're not directly giving money to an attorney or to the plaintiff. You're buying stock in LexShares LLC. So if this company defaults, poof, your money's gone because there's no money for you to collect. But if you win your case, you can get a lot of money. If the case is thrown out, or if you lose the case, or if the winnings from the case don't exceed the legal fees, then you could end up making absolutely nothing. You could get some of your money back, or you could make possibly a considerable amount of money. And each and every lawsuit that they offer out to investors, and I have my little scare quotes up, is different and has a unique contract. So you have to read that contract and understand what you're investing in. Also, LexShares collects a fee, and that fee can be as high as 2% per year. And they also have a carrying fee. So the money that they're holding for you, they charge interest from you on that for them to manage it all. So it can be very expensive. And of course, even if a lawsuit does yield you 20 or 30 or 40 or 50% on your money, keep in mind it might take years to resolve. So if you made 20% on something, you didn't make 20% in a day. You may have made 20% over 3 years. If you had invested as normal stock market returns, or give or take 10% a year. So you might have made more money just doing something regular. So that's something to worry about. So to wrap up, it's a different way of investing. It's not correlated to the stock market, which is always one of the big marketing pitches for stuff like this. And it's true. It's not correlated to the stock market. But keep in mind, if the plaintiff does not win, or if the winnings in the case are not above all the costs that you paid to play, you could lose 100% of your money. If the judge dismisses the case, your money is gone. I mean, you might get some remnant back, but probably not. It's going to be gone because the attorneys did all their work. So it's not something I'm interested in. I don't understand enough about it. And one of my basic rules is I don't understand something well enough, I don't invest in it. So that's a little bit on LexShares. The other fun thing, just very, very brief follow up on the fun with Bitcoin. I still get, what do we call this? Angry emails. So I received this little gem from a Bitcoin aficionado. And again, I will do a quote here. Quote, "I can't wait until you eat your own damn words with cryptocurrency." I'm not sure that sentence is properly structured in and of itself, but whatever. Let me continue. You already are. I already are what? Okay, anyway, I go, you just don't realize it yet. Okay, so they can't wait till I eat my own words, but I already am, and I don't realize it, and apparently they don't realize it either because they can't wait. Anyhow, I continue. Keep posting ignorant bullshit about it. Great way to make people realize you are a hack. Yep, that's me. So that's some fun with Bitcoin. And by the way, in the last week, Bitcoin has fallen from 15,000 to 11,000, give or take. And a few times today, it has dropped below 10,000. And I think the low was 9,300. Keeping in mind that when I put out my show, it was near the all-time high of $19,800. And so I've had a few people jokingly say that it's because of my show. Obviously, they're delusional. I'm sure they mean that in jest, that, I'm a small nobody with this little podcast, but it might go back up. I would not be surprised if it goes back up some, because people that are into Bitcoin are really into it. They're really committed. And who knows? The thing is, I don't know what's going to eventually happen, but there's no value underlying Bitcoin. And of course, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back to December 22nd and listen to my double podcast on it. And hopefully this is going to be the last I talk about it, although I kind of find that unlikely. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk to Andrew Seidel.
Behold the atheist's nightmare. Now, if you study a well-made banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 ridges. On the close side, 2 ridges. If you get your hand ready to grip a banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 grooves, on the close side 2 grooves. The banana and the hand are perfectly made one for the other. You'll find the maker of the banana, Almighty God, has made it with a non-slip surface. It has outward indicators of inward contents: green, too early; yellow, just right; black, too late. Now, if you go to the top of the banana, you'll find, as with the soda can makers, they placed a tab at the top. So God has placed a tab at the top. When you pull the tab, the contents don't squirt on your face. You'll find the wrapper, which is biodegradable, has perforations. Notice how gracefully it sits over the human hand. Notice it has a point at the top for ease of entry. It's just the right shape for the human mouth. It's chewy, easy to digest, and it's even curved toward the face to make the whole process so much easier.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Of course, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. And of course, now with me, I have one of my all-time favorite guests. Don't tell him I've said that about anyone else. It is Andrew Seidel. He's a staff attorney from the Freedom from the Freedom From, with Freedom From Religion Foundation. Andrew, how are you today, sir?
I am well, Phil. How are you? And you know what? I think it must be a while since we talked, because I got a promotion since we last chatted. I'm no longer a staff attorney.
You're no longer just staff, huh?
I'm the director of strategic response here at FFRF.
You know, I think that was that announced at the conference, or did you?
It was. Yeah.
My apologies, because I know how maniacally important that is to attorney-like people.
How could you not remember my absurd new title? I don't know how.
It's not quite long enough.
I know. Well, it was kind of like, it was sort of an in-house placeholder joke that kind of stuck. Probably shouldn't have said that, but that's okay.
The one thing I do want to let my listeners know, and it's going to be a big tease, is that, and at this point in time, I don't even know what it is. And Andrew, what I want to do is push this towards the end of our discussion, just because drama. You have an announcement that we are actually recording, and is this the very first time you've put this down on audio anywhere?
It is.
Okay, so you are going to give us an announcement. Oh, I hope this is going to be worth the build, Andrew. Is it going to be worth the build?
I mean, I hope so. I think so. I'm really excited about it.
Okay, somewhere later in this interview, Andrew is going to give us a super secret announcement that we are recording in advance, and following long-standing traditions of media, I am going to embargo this entire show until it becomes public. So the listeners of the Phil Ferguson Show are going to be some of the very first people to know about this information. And, of course, Andrew will probably give us some juicy details. But before we get to that fun stuff, how are you, Andrew?
I am doing pretty well. Life is good. I mean, it's very busy. The new title came with new responsibilities.
And a big fat pay increase, right?
Yeah. We nonprofit attorneys are known for our big salaries.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but life is really good. That, the new administration is about a year old now, and they've kept us incredibly busy.
Is this Trump you're talking about?
That it would be Trump.
Okay.
The news is going to relate to that administration.
I've heard of him. Uh-oh, teaser.
Yeah. So, I mean, life is really great. Where FFRF is kind of kicking butt lately. I haven't looked at the numbers since before our busy season, which, so for tax people, the busy season is April, but for FFRF, the busy season is Thanksgiving to Christmas. And I haven't looked at the lawsuit numbers since then, but before that, we were 14-3 in lawsuits over the past 2 years.
Now, when you say 14-3, you mean that's the decisions that have gone in your favor?
I mean, 14 wins and 3 what you could categorize as losses. And so those would be cases that we won either with a court decision or settled in our favor, or didn't. And actually, a couple of the losses are being appealed, too. So the numbers can change, and they could change in both directions. And obviously, we have ongoing lawsuits, too. But that's where we are right now. So,
and if I recall correctly, the vast majority of your legal victories, we'll call them successes, whatever, happen before you ever even get involved with courts, right?
Yeah, so that's just talking about the actual cases that courts have been involved in. When you're talking about non-court cases, so the bulk of what FFRF tries to do is educate government entities that are violating the Constitution and explain, here's what you're doing, here's what the Constitution says, so here's why what you're doing is wrong. Please stop.
And I'm sure you're aware, but maybe not, because you guys have multiple people on the legal staff there. What is it, 8 or 9 people now?
We have 9 attorneys now.
9 attorneys. I actually got involved in my first official complaint with the FFRF.
I remember.
I happened to take a picture. I think it was Kankakee or Bradley Kankakee County Sheriff's.
Kankakee, yeah.
So you know more about it than I do, because I just took a picture and sent it to you and said, hey, look at this. Isn't it funny? But on their cars, their patrol cars, that has a thing about God. And I was like, what the, come on. Why is that even necessary? And this is in a state, Illinois, northern Illinois, that you don't normally think of as being anywhere but near the Bible Belt. And it's a pretty good-sized modern city. And here it has an appeal to God right on the car. Yeah,
and that's actually one of the harder issues for us to stop. But we do believe that's unconstitutional, and we'll take on issues even if they are hard. But last year in 2017, I think the number was we got over 300 victories just by writing educational letters and explaining what the law is. So, we stopped 300 violations like that simply by just pointing this out.
Yeah.
Now, specifically on that one, In God We Trust on police cars is difficult because, In God We Trust is the national motto.
Is a national motto.
But the thing about it,
yes,
that this is the thing that it really irks me. Okay, because
all right, go for it.
The reason courts have upheld this. Okay, sometimes this is referred to as ceremonial deism. It's the same kind of thing as one nation under God. But the reason that courts have upheld one nation under God and in God we trust as the motto and in the pledge is because they said that any religious freight the words may have been meant to carry originally has been lost. And basically, so what they're saying is that through rote repetition, that's the phrase they use, through rote repetition, any significant religious content is gone. Okay, so just pause to appreciate that, because in God we trust is clearly a religious statement. It's saying that we trust in God to do whatever. And if a court had been saying that John 3:16 had lost all its religious significance through rote repetition, the religious right would be going nuts, and rightfully so. A court should not be saying that a statement that is on its face religious is not religious.
Yeah,
for a court to do that, the court itself is crossing the line between the separation of state and church, and it's something that they've done kind of time and time again. So it's really, really sort of frustrating. In one of the cases, they said that the patriotic or ceremonial character of those phrases bears no true resemblance to the government sponsorship of a religious exercise, which is not true. I mean, it cannot be that you trust in God unless you believe in that God and that He has an affair or has a hand in the affairs of mankind, right? It's just, that's not a thing that happens if you don't believe that. So, it's to me, it's very clearly a religious statement, and there's an enormous amount of hypocrisy, Christian hypocrisy, rolled into that phrase. They're perfectly willing to let a court say that's not a religious phrase, but if a court were to do that for something that was in their churches versus on public money, they would go absolutely bonkers, and rightfully so. So anyway, it's hypocritical.
No, I love it, because I think to myself, they say, well, it's not religious. Then you say, well, fine, then take it away. Well, no, we don't want that, because now it's maniacally important. And I thought of the one of the ways I like to point out if something is absurd is take it to a logical extreme and make it illogical or something. What if your local government required everyone to take a knee and eat a wafer and a little shot of grape juice?
Yeah.
And they did that every week for years. Does that now mean it's not a religious thing?
I mean, the religious right, they're perfectly willing to let the government desecrate their religion so long as it allows them to promote their religion at the same time. That's basically what it boils down to.
It's kind of like it's okay to lie as long as you're promoting Christianity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great.
I wrote a whole article, if people are interested in this, on Free Thought Now, FFRF's blog, and I included all the court decisions with all the language that the courts use to kind of dilute this. It was called The Christian Hypocrisy That God We Trust, I think, but people can go look it up if they're interested. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Anyway, all of that was to say that the complaint you brought us, because it is, it has been okayed by courts, theoretically, that it is a difficult one for us to win, but it's still one that we're willing to take on.
Yeah, it'd be better if they started putting other Bible verses on their website or on the sides of the car. That's different, I guess.
And yeah, that's different, and those we've actually sued over and won cases on those.
I like it. Now, in a calendar year, like 2017, for example, how many inbound complaints do you get?
So typically we get between 4,500 and 5,000 inbound complaints every year. Now, some of those are repeats when, something big is happening, when the Phil Ferguson show covers an issue, or when Hemant on the Friendly Atheist posts about something, we'll get 7, 8, 9, sometimes maybe as many as 20 people reporting the same thing. So, if you kind of kick out the duplicates, the unique ones probably come to about 3,000.
Yeah.
And of course, not all those are violations. People are reporting things and saying, is this a violation, or they're not giving enough information. And so, we'll investigate to the best that we're able to. And if it's a violation, we'll take action, write a letter, and if it's not, then we explain to the people why, and move on from there.
And I was looking through the webpage, and I got a bunch of stuff that we'll try to hit during our conversation. But one link has new legal successes, and I was just scrolling through there, and I found one about a pizza joint in Bentonville, Arkansas. Do you know anything about this one?
I can guess based just on that description that it was. My guess is that it was a church bulletin discount.
Yeah, it was
right?
at Johnny Brusco's New York style pizza in Bentonville, Arkansas, and I saw this and I thought, I really am truly genuinely incensed because I have been in Bentonville, Arkansas, and there is no fucking way that they serve New York style pizza.
The home of Walmart?
Yeah, exactly. I actually helped Walmart find more money for a couple of years, but that's another story. But it's just like I've been to places where they have Chicago style pizza, and we go and we order the pizza, and I'm like, no, I don't know how you got the idea that this is Chicago style.
Now, Phil, are you a pizza snob? Is this something that listeners need to know about you? For instance, I fully admit that I am a snob about. There are one or two pieces of food items that I am very snobbish about.
I would go with my currently coined phrase that I use slightly derogatory about people who are Bitcoin lovers. I'll call them Bitcoin aficionados. I'll call myself mockingly a pizza aficionado.
Okay, good to know.
So I appreciate a good slice of New York pizza. But if I had a choice, and this is going to probably get me some hate mail, so I apologize in advance. If you sent me down with a New York style or Chicago style piece of pizza, I'm going to go with Chicago. and that's going to upset people. And, pizza was not meant to be served on a little bitty cracker or a slice that is 6-7 inches wide. Now, 2 inches thick, I can work with. But, yeah. So New York is fine. I'll eat it. If I'm in New York, you got to get New York pizza. But if you're in Bentonville, Arkansas, forget about it.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason I knew what you were talking about is because there's not often cases that involve restaurants that FFRF gets involved in. Because the First Amendment and the separation of state and church, it obviously applies to state, which a business is not a government entity. So we usually aren't involved in those. The only time we do get involved is when the business is violating the state or federal Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
And one way that they do that is by giving Christians who attend church a discount on their food versus everybody else. Now, what the laws basically say is that you can't discriminate in places of public accommodation based on a number of factors, including religion. So basically, you could not, for instance, charge Jewish people a higher price for your pizza, or you could not charge atheists a higher price for your pizza. By the same token, you can't give Christians a discount just because they're Christians. And, having people bring in their church bulletin is a proxy for if you're a Christian, you get a discount here.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I like it. And of course, it says that the owner promptly called and said, we're not doing it anymore. And you're like, okay, well, I guess that takes care of that.
Yeah, and that's mostly the way that we are able to resolve these. And oftentimes, we get a really positive response. There was a school district in California that one of the other attorneys was working on a case with where they were taking their kids to a camp in the Redwoods, and it happened to be a very religious camp, and the camp discriminated against who they hired. You had to be an evangelical Christian. Everybody who worked there had to do that. They had to sign this ridiculous statement of faith, all this kind of stuff. And if you wouldn't have really known it just kind of from glancing at their website and not doing kind of a deeper dive. And we laid out all these facts. We really did that deep dive and explained all the facts to the school district, and we got a letter back saying, hey, we actually didn't know any of this. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, and we found another place for the students to go. And, had we known this, we wouldn't have done it in the first place. And that's really the way that we prefer to operate. A lot of times schools don't realize what they're doing is wrong, or they don't understand that, they literally don't know that a teacher is telling kids that they have to pray or have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or something like that. So oftentimes, it's just a rogue employee that we're dealing with, or they don't understand the law or the facts of what's happening, and we're able to help educate them. So that's really the way that we prefer to operate. But if you mess with us, we will sue you.
Well, it was funny because what I've learned over the years from FFRF and some other organizations, I actually use directly, and I think we may have talked about this before, but really briefly. When my daughter was in high school, they would announce the Fellowship of Christian Athletes every Wednesday morning would provide breakfast to every single student in the high school for free. And this was announced literally every day in the school that Wednesday. And so I sent an email to the school asking what was the policy for announcements in the school, because if they're the only group asking for this announcement and anyone can get it, there's no violation, at least in my limited understanding. And
that's correct.
And I got back an email, there's no rules. It's just whatever the principal decides is in the best interest of the students. And so I asked them to make an announcement that the Atheist Club was going to have breakfast on Thursday, and they said no. And so I was very easily able to cite some court cases, and they stopped making the announcements. It was incredibly easy. I didn't even have to involve you guys. They just were like, oh, shit. We just showed preference, and that's a problem for us.
Yeah, and a lot of times that does happen. We actually run in the FFRF paper, Free Thought Today, we run a section. I don't think it's in every paper, but it pays to complain is what we call it. And it's just, members like you who just go out and do their own thing and get these violations stopped on their own. And we love to see that. I mean, as attorneys, we love to see that. We have 5,000 complaints coming in every year. We got plenty to do. So if you want to fix it on your own, go for it.
A little shift here. Convention. Do you know any details about the convention for 2018?
I don't know anything. All I know is that it's in San Francisco. And
is that not enough?
I think I'm going, but I don't know. So,
well,
you'll probably be there, right? You're always there.
I have every intention of going. I make most FFRF conventions now. Almost every other year, it's in Madison.
Yes.
And so it's an easy drive. And, even though you're downtown, the rates aren't too bad. I gotta say that as far as, and I'm obviously biased, but I've been to a lot of conventions, and as far as, the fees for the convention itself and the rooms, like, it really is one of the, especially for what you're getting for who shows up to our conventions, I think it's one of the better values out there. Yeah, it's definitely on the higher end of the scale as far as not only, price and quality and size. It's pretty amazing. I do see the one here at San Francisco that the room rate, the special room rate, downtown San Francisco. First of all, if you don't understand that downtown San Francisco is going to be expensive, well, I'm sorry, you just don't understand. But the room is $235, so there's some real money involved here. It's not a $79 hotel in Dubuque, Iowa. You're in freaking San Francisco, and I haven't booked yet. I don't think I can actually book.
I don't know if you can yet, but I will say this too: FFRF doesn't make money on the conventions. That's one area where we've decided as an organization that we do not wish to use the convention as a way to generate income for the organization, and that's one reason that we're able to keep it, more moderately priced and more affordable for people. We rely on the generosity of our members to help us out, and just that they just decided that a long time ago, and that's always the way it's been. So.
Sure. And just for the listeners, it's November 2nd through 4th, and as soon as it opens up, I'll have some announcements at where to go get your tickets and reservations. You could probably book the hotel now, just by the way, listeners, in case you want to get in early. I got to think about this. I got to talk with my wife, because we might make like a 5 or 7 day vacation in San Francisco out of it.
I think people would be crazy not to do that if they're flying in for it.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually going to do that too.
Excellent. Well, I'll see you in San Francisco. But so we've got that, and another thing that's growing amazingly, because I've been around. I just saw the page about billboards. The first billboard was in 2007.
Is that right? Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I went to the FFRF conference in Madison that year in 2007. And I stopped it was called the Beltway. Is that right?
Yep.
I went along and I found the billboard and I have a picture of it. So the very first billboard of that kind, I got the picture back in 2007. And I think that was actually, it must have been the year, it was either that year or a couple years later when I got to hang with Hitchens.
Yeah, I think he was 8 or 9. I think when he came to the FFR. Actually, was he 11? No, yeah, he was 8 or 9. When
it's probably 9, assuming it's every other year. But there was a period there where the conference was going to be every third year in Madison, and then it went back to every other year in Madison. Which, whatever, you guys do whatever you got to do. But I walked up. I was late coming back from lunch, and some Christians were handing out pamphlets on the walkway from the street to the Monona Terrace, and talking about how evil we were and how we were wrong and blah blah blah. And I started talking to one of the guys, and I said, "Well, why don't you come in with me and listen to some of the speakers?" And he says, "Well, I didn't get a ticket." I said, "I'll pay for your ticket." And every time I went to solve a problem he had another excuse. He just wouldn't do it. So I met up with some people. We were again running late, and we get to the front of the building, and there's Hitchens leaning up against the side of the entryway, just smoking a cigarette, cooler than fuck, right? And he's just standing there, and I walk up to him. We start talking. I said, "Can I get a picture with you?" And he takes a big, long drag on a cigarette, blows out the smoke, and goes, "Do whatever the fuck you want." And so I'm standing next to him like this total fanboy. It was embarrassing, and get a picture with him. And then we're like, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be on stage in like 2 minutes?" He's like, "Yeah." So we encourage him to go inside. And we're coming down the escalators to the lower level, because that year it was in the bottom lower basement area. And at the bottom of the escalator is Annie Laurie, who is a stickler for time, and she is not happy.
Yeah, the conventions are a stressful time for Annie Laurie, and when things are not running quite on schedule, the trains need to run on time.
Yeah,
for her to feel zen sort of about the convention.
So one of the things I know about chapters is, for the longest time there was 3 or 4 chapters for FFRF, and I went to the page just looking around for stuff to talk about with you, and you guys have a lot of chapters now. What happened here?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just that local activists want 2 things. One, they want to be more involved in their community as activists. So we're seeing a lot of that with our chapters in places like Florida, Triangle Free Thought in North Carolina, the Portland chapter, the California chapter. And then the other thing that people are really looking for is community. They want to get together with like-minded skeptics, atheists, freethinkers, and talk about these fun issues, and have a meal and have a beer. And so I think you're kind of seeing both community building and activism kind of coming up side by side. And there are some chapters where they're really good at one and not so great at the other, and then others where they've mastered both of them. And they're growing. Like the Chicago chapter does some really, really great community stuff. And they actually do some great activism too, putting up signage and education and stuff like that. So, I mean, we have really just some great local people out there who are building these vibrant communities. It's really nice to see, actually. And I get to go travel around and speak to them from time to time, and it's really, really lovely. The Tennessee chapters, just pissing everybody in Tennessee off in the best possible ways with their activism. It's really nice to see.
I love it. And of course, the Chicago one, I was just downtown for Christmas. I think it was right before Christmas. And there was a festival of something on Daly Plaza. And I had forgotten about the Illinois chapter having a display, because there's this giant, like 10 foot by 10 foot, 12 foot by 12 foot Christmas display of the nativity scene. Yeah. And so now, because of the local chapter of FFRF, there's a display and a little sign and like a 4 or 5 foot high red scarlet letter A.
And they also have they do a display at Easter as well, where it's a huge sign that the Christians put up, I think. And we actually built in my driveway the frame for the FFRF sign. So it was me and two of the other staff attorneys here, Sam Grover and Patrick Elliott, building this in my driveway. My neighbors are kind of looking out, and they're kind of like, they know what I do, but they're kind of looking out and they're like, is this thing going to be permanently in his front yard? Like, what's going on here? But yeah, we drove that down. So they do a couple different displays, and they actually also have not just the Daily Plaza during Christmas. They also have a few others that go up around sort of suburbs in the area as well.
Well, that's great. Now, other legal things. What do you have? Not the big announcement yet, but what else do you have going on that you've either won that you want to talk about, or is in court, or something you've written letters on? What's new with the legal front?
One of the big cases that we're working on right now is the Chino Valley School Board prayer case. This is kind of a big case because if your listeners remember, a few years back, the Supreme Court said that government prayers, which had historically been limited to legislatures, so state legislatures, were now okay at the local level. And that case was kind of accepted as a signal by a lot of school boards that they could go ahead and pray too. And historically, that's not been the case. Every court to look at whether or not a school board can pray has said no, it absolutely cannot. And even under the exception that we had for state legislatures, which we call the Marsh exception, school boards are not allowed to. And so we've been litigating that case for a number of years now. And as we were litigating it, the American Humanist Association actually started litigating another one in Texas. And they lost at each level up to the Fifth Circuit, and also asked the Supreme Court to review it. The case was basically fast-tracked. The Ninth Circuit is notoriously slow. The Fifth Circuit is not. And we were getting really worried that, the Supreme Court would accept that case instead, which had, lost at the various levels, and the facts weren't as strong as ours. But the Supreme Court decided not to, and so our case is still ongoing, and it has the opportunity to really limit that bad decision that the Supreme Court made a few years ago about expanding school board prayer. We're pretty proud of that. That's actually, the decision on that is kind of due any day now, meaning that the briefing is done. We've had the oral argument, and we argued before the 3-judge panel, and they could decide it any day. My guess is that we probably won't see a decision for maybe 3 or 4 months at the earliest, but theoretically it literally could be any day. And I think we're going to win that one. I'm feeling pretty confident about it based on the way oral argument went, which is not something you should usually predict, right. But I'm doing it anyway.
Well, I know sometimes I've listened to or heard transcripts read, particularly from the Supreme Court, and sometimes, but only sometimes, you can get a pretty good vibe by the questions, how they're phrased, how they're framed, who's going to vote which way on a subject. But sometimes they surprise you and they change their mind in an argument.
It's really hard to. I mean, so for instance, if you listened to the Masterpiece Cake Shop argument, this is the gay wedding cake case in Colorado. The judges were asking the lawyers questions, but they weren't really asking the lawyers questions. What they were actually doing was arguing with the other justices on the bench using the lawyers. So Chief Justice Roberts described this once as saying that during oral argument, the lawyers are more like a backboard. The justices are bouncing questions off the lawyer back to the other judges. So in that case, you had the liberal justices trying to get their conservative colleagues to recognize that if they allow this baker to discriminate, either because he has a free speech right or he has a free exercise of religion right to discriminate against this gay couple, if you allow that, there is no logical, legitimate legal rationale that prevents you. There's no place to draw the line, basically. Right. To stop it. And that's every question they were asking for the most part. Every question the liberal justices were asking for the most part was meant to hammer that point home to their conservative colleagues. And I thought they did a really good job. They actually got the bakery's attorney to admit that while the baker is absolutely engaged in First Amendment protected expression, the chef a hypothetical chef is not. So a baker is, a chef is not. A makeup artist is not. A hairstylist is not. A tailor is not. So the bakery had all these really bad admissions that also go to that point. How can you possibly draw that line? And then the big question in the case was, well, how can we stop this from undermining racial discrimination? Because that's the one that kind of everybody agrees is terrible, even the conservatives. Some of them. Yeah, some of them. Yeah, I mean, but the point was that the only answer that the bakery had was race is just different. Yeah. But there was no logic, there was no rationale, there was nothing in the law. It was just race is different, and that's going to be a very difficult line.
Well,
the Supreme Court to draw.
I want to bounce this off you because the counter argument I often hear is, and someone will take this and they'll spin it a little bit and they'll say, if you had a cake shop, Phil, and someone came in and made a request that you make a 3-foot long penis cake, are we now saying that you as an artist are compelled to do something you find disgusting?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we all know you love penis cake, so let's just be clear about that. So you would obviously
especially the creamy center.
So, but the second thing is, I should tell people, I wrote a whole article about this called "Winning the Gay Wedding Cake Debate" or something like that before oral argument, talking about kind of all the popular arguments that you hear out in social media against this case and why they're wrong. So first of all, you are not a protected class. Okay, so making a penis cake is not a protected class. That's not a thing that is protected under the civil rights statute. The gay couple, under the Colorado law, they are a protected class because of their sexual orientation. The baker, when they came into his shop, said, sorry, I do not make cakes for gay couples or for gay weddings. So they didn't ask him to design a specific cake. They didn't say, I want a rainbow cake. And then he said, I don't make rainbow cakes. He denied them service because of who they were, period. And that's why the case arose. So he wasn't doing it because I don't make cakes that say gay weddings are great. I don't make cakes that have two males on top in the little cake topper thing, two grooms. It was none of that. It was, oh, you guys are gay? I'm not doing this for you. It's a very different scenario. The second thing that you hear a lot of is well, would this force, and this actually came up in oral argument a ton, would this force a African American, a black baker, to bake a cake for Nazis? And the answer to that is no, because Nazis are not a protected class under the civil rights statute either. I think there are like one or two very small local jurisdictions that protect political affiliation as a protected class, but I mean, even that might be a stretch. You might have to have a hard time arguing that. So I mean, that's not an issue that would come up. So most of the arguments are pretty spurious against.
Well, it's interesting, and maybe it's not a legal standard, but I think if someone comes into your shop and just wants a birthday cake for their 5-year-old Tommy, who's going to have a birthday, and the dude happens to be a Nazi, and it's not a Nazi cake. I mean, I'm not asking you to put a swastika on a cake. I'm asking you to put "Happy Birthday, Tommy, you be 5," whatever. If you say, "I'm sorry, I happen to know that you're a Nazi sympathizer," I still have a problem with that, even though it might not meet the same legal standard.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I think that's a decent one because it does not meet the same legal standard, right? Because because it is not a protected class. It's a good example of Nazism not being a protected class, and why that wouldn't apply in that instance. But I do understand.
Now, can I be denied a cake simply because I'm an atheist?
So that would not be allowed. Because religion is a protected class, and that almost always includes non-religion. The ability to choose no religion is protected as the ability to choose any other religion is protected. So that'd be no different than discriminating against a Jewish patron because they were Jewish.
Fair enough. Now, that's something I have to ask you about, and I've been bugging you for a long time, Andrew. Your book, dude. What's going on?
Yeah, I have an agent. And she is right now working on selling it to publishers. It's the most frustrating moment of the book process because I can't do anything on it right now. Everything is sort of in her hands, and you're just sitting here waiting to hear good news that hopefully will come. She was very optimistic, which is why she took me on as a client. So hopefully I'll hear good news on it soon. But it's oddly the most frustrating part because I'm just sitting here just waiting, and that's not me. I like to act. I like action. I'm a life of action, as Teddy Roosevelt said. So it's weird for me to be sitting here just waiting.
It's basically written.
Yeah, I have a draft, and who knows how that's going to come down because publishers obviously going to have their own ideas. But I think it's really. I hope something happens soon because it's really going to be timely with.
So it is your book. You don't want to wait, but is it one of these any day now kind of things?
No. So the next thing will be the agent hopefully gets me a book deal with the publisher. After that, it'll be working with the publisher, and I don't know. I just have no idea how long that process takes. Yeah. I think it won't be too bad because we have most of it's pretty good or pretty done. It'll just depend on how much we are on the same page, which I don't think is a pun.
Well, what is the general gist of this? Because I have listeners that weren't here a year ago. What's the book going to be about?
The book disposes of, hopefully forever, the notion that we are a Christian nation by diving deeper than the kind of just the surface. So there's an argument that underlies that. And you actually were there the first time I ever gave a talk about this at Free Thought Fest.
Indeed.
I think in 2012. And it's the idea that we're founded on Judeo-Christian principles, right? And so that's the idea that underlies this. And my argument goes through the principles of Judeo-Christianity and compares them to America's founding principles. And when you look at those two, and when you compare them, when you compare the Ten Commandments to the Bill of Rights, when you compare those principles, which are evident in the Bible, to the principles that are laid out in our Constitution, there is such a fundamental conflict that it is fair to say that Christianity is un-American. So that's kind of the central thesis of the book. Susan Jacoby, who wrote Freethinkers, The Great Agnostic, she's actually has agreed to write a foreword to the book and has been kind of mentoring me and was the one who convinced me to go find an agent and try to get it published by a big house rather than just, kind of doing my own thing. So.
Yeah. Well, her books are fantastic. And she is one of the very few people that I get a little fanboy over because I really, really enjoyed their books, the flow to them, and just how well written they are. So
she's a phenomenal writer, and she's been a really great mentor to me, and kind of helping me through this whole process. We email pretty regularly, and I'm excited for her to see her forward to the book. When she said yes to that, I kind of couldn't believe it. So.
I'm excited. I've been excited for over a year, maybe 3 or 4 now. So
it's killing me too, man.
Yeah. So, all right, we've got all that stuff. Anything about FFRF that you want to cover before we get to the big one?
I think it's the one thing that I would like to draw people's attention to, and people ought to know, is that we're growing. We're growing fast. We're adding members like there's no tomorrow, because we are at such a crisis point in this country right now. We talked about the gay wedding cake case a little bit, but if the Supreme Court decides that baker has a religious right to discriminate, that completely redefines religious freedom in this country in a way that we've never seen. And it also, in doing that, it actually also upends the separation of state and church. It is a hugely important case. And if it goes the wrong way, there's going to be so much more work to do just to claw back the ground that we have won over the past 200 years.
I see it as a step to anarchy because if everyone has a different religious perspective. Any store you go to, any pharmacy you go to, any McDonald's restaurant you go to.
You're closer to the mark than I think you realize. And the Supreme Court in 1879 in U.S. versus Reynolds actually said almost the exact same thing. They said, can a man excuse his actions because of his religious beliefs? And they said to do this would allow each man to be a law unto himself.
Yeah.
And and that government can only exist in name under such circumstances.
I'm
I've
sure
that a little bit, but that's I mean, you're 100% right on, and we are so worried that the Supreme Court is not going to see this, that's what we devoted our entire brief to in the case. And I was actually glad that we did, because the oral argument was focused a lot more on the religious issue than everybody kind of thought it was going to. Most people thought this was going to turn on free speech, and after oral arguments, people were starting to say, you know what, maybe not. Maybe this is going to be a religious. So anyway.
Well, I mean, didn't Trump just in the last day or so make some statement that someone should not have to choose between their religious persuasions and the law?
Yeah. So as we're recording this, yesterday was Religious Freedom Day, which is the day that we celebrate the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which Thomas Jefferson wrote and then was shepherded through the General Assembly of Virginia by James Madison in 1786, which was actually about 9 years after Jefferson wrote it. Jefferson was actually in France at the time, helping get them to join the revolution, or our revolution. And the law is pretty remarkable, but it goes to exactly what we're talking about. The law says that the right to believe is definitely absolute, but the right to act on those beliefs is not. And that's the conflict that you're seeing in this bakery case right now. The baker is free to believe that gay people, he actually said, I think this was a quote, Jesus was a carpenter, and I don't think he would have made a bed for their wedding. Okay? So he's free to believe that. Nobody's saying he can't, but he can't necessarily act on that belief. And the difference between an absolute right to believe and an absolute right to action is critical. I mean, without it, you're talking about anarchy. And the Supreme Court in that same case in 1879 actually used human sacrifice as an example. You know, they say if you believe that you have this religious mandate to sacrifice your child, say as Abraham believes in the Bible, or as Jephthah does to his daughter in the Bible, or as John 3:16 explains that God did in the Bible, you do not have a religious right to do so. At that point, religious freedom is completely irrelevant. Once your religious beliefs start impacting the rights of others, the government can step in. And that's what you have here. This guy's religious belief is impacting the rights of others. His business, which is this commercial entity, is discriminating against other people. It's perfectly legitimate for the government to step in at that point.
Well, maybe a case that would go the other way, and it would be much more sympathetic to Republicans and conservatives and Christians, is for someone to claim that they have the right to smoke pot publicly because of their religious beliefs, and take that all the way up and have them crush that, and then now you've got precedent.
I mean, you actually have a case almost like that involving peyote.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
yeah. This is the Employment Division v. Smith case in 1990, where two individuals, one was a practitioner of a Native American religion, and one was just a guy visiting a Native American church, took part in the peyote ceremony that they did there. They were drug counselors. So because they were drug counselors doing illegal drugs, they were fired for cause. And because they were fired for cause, they were ineligible for unemployment benefits. So they sued the state saying, well, hang on, we get unemployment because you fired us for our religious beliefs. And the Supreme Court said, look, no, you're drug counselors who are using drugs. It doesn't matter that you have a religious belief to do them. The government's perfectly able to ban all drugs, and you don't necessarily get an exemption for that. I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that drug counselors should not be using drugs. So
it's one of those things. I remember I had a law class, so this qualifies me to say this, but I had one law class when I was getting my MBA, and the one thing that the teacher said that really has always stuck with me is the law doesn't necessarily have to make sense. It is the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where sometimes people get all indignant because you're giving me a ticket for this, so this shouldn't be illegal. Well, that aside, it is.
And that's one of the big arguments in the gay wedding case. Everybody who's talking about, well, the free market should be out there correcting this, and if they don't want this baker to bake them a cake, they should just go elsewhere. Like, that's fine and good and all, but that actually has no relevance to the case at hand. And that's because there is a civil rights law that says they have a right not to be discriminated against.
And I tell you what, anytime I ever hear that you can go somewhere else bullshit is someone who's never lived in a small town.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too, and I go over that at length in my.
Yeah, there's only one baker, there's only one florist, there's only one dentist, and if these people get to start choosing who they pick and serve, you have entire classes of people that will not be able to get any basic services in the town that they live in, and it will be anarchy. But enough fun about that. Let's get to this announcement because I know your time is precious and we're using a lot of it, and I appreciate you being on the Phil Ferguson Show. So what is this magical thing that happened?
So I know you hang on my every social media post.
Of course.
And I know you follow my career closely, but do you remember back in the summer when I went on to Fox and Friends and I was talking about the White House Bible study?
Yeah. Good fun.
Yeah. So one of the issues that we have is Mike Pence sponsors this Bible study. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the CIA Director Mike Pompeo.
I'm sorry, I just got shivers. Go ahead.
Rick Perry, our Energy Secretary, Ben Carson, who runs Housing and Urban Development. All these secretaries attend this Bible study that's put on by a guy named Ralph Drollinger of Capital Ministries. He's this conservative Christian. He's called Catholicism the world's largest false religion. He's declared homosexuality an abomination. He says it's sinful for women to serve in public office, basically not to be working at home. So this is the guy who's having this Bible study with, the most powerful people in the executive branch of our government. And we wanted to know, are they using public resources for this? Because there could be a serious state church problem here if employees of these secretaries feel coerced into attending, or if they're sending out emails and helping schedule this and using public resources for this clearly religious act. So we did a bunch of open records requests on it, and it turns out that the Freedom from Religion Foundation, along with CREW, which is Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, government watchdog, are going to go ahead and sue Ben Carson over the White House Bible study. And that's basically because he is refusing to release any records that are associated with it without charging us an obscene amount of money, which is illegal. So we're going to go ahead and sue Ben Carson, another lawsuit against the Trump administration, for their love of this religion. Basically, it's really a political religion. Trump didn't find religion until he all of a sudden started running for office.
Yeah. Well, he won the first time he ran, by the way.
What's that?
He won the very first time he ran.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very impressive. So anyway, yeah, we're suing over the White House Bible study. That's the short headline, which is very exciting for me. It's exactly what I was talking about on that Fox News interview. They said, "Oh, do you really think it's possible that?" And yeah, of course it's possible that they're using resources, federal resources, taxpayer resources for this. It's something that we see all the time, and the fact that they're hiding all the records that we're trying to get, to me, is pretty suggestive. So.
Well, that is fantastic. I look forward to that. I would love to see Ben Carson in jail. How about that? Or Trump, maybe.
Sadly, that's not going to be an outcome of it. He won't lose office or anything like that. And technically, Housing and Urban Development is the actual branch of the government, as opposed to Carson himself is going to be the defendant. But it's because he runs it. And so CREW also requested a bunch of records, and they were denied the fee waiver as well. I'm sure you heard all about the private planes that all the secretaries have been taking.
Yep.
So CREW was requesting records about that. They were denied those. The ASPCA was denied some records. Public Citizen was denied records. So CREW and the FFRF are taking this lawsuit jointly, and are joint plaintiffs. And I mean, really, it's if the Bible study is legal and above board, as this administration and as Fox News have argued, what are they trying to hide by torpedoing this records process?
I don't think they can help themselves. They have to deny. I mean, I've never seen an organization, and we just saw, I can't remember her name, the woman who is now the head of Department of Homeland Security, acknowledging that she isn't sure if Norway is mostly white.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And actually, I don't know, there wasn't too much news coverage of this, but you heard about the Museum of the Bible, yes.
What is that? Maybe I haven't.
So they actually hosted an event called Revive Us 2. There was a Revive Us 1, apparently, with everybody's favorite creationist, the Christian activist, former child actor Kirk Cameron.
Oh, my.
So he hosted this at the Museum of the Bible. The trailer for it was hilarious. It was him walking through kind of a condemned building all the way up to the roof. I don't really know what it's supposed to symbolize. Maybe getting closer to God. That's probably what it was.
Yeah.
And then Ben Carson also appeared at that. And, you know, he was one of the things we also made another records request later on about his involvement with that, and were they using public resources for both his appearance and maybe for the conference itself, and they denied those records too. So this is, you know, it's a very opaque administration, especially when it comes to the way they're mixing religion in.
Well, I love it. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time, and I greatly appreciate it. And, of course, all the wonderful work that the FFRF does. And with a little luck, fingers crossed, we'll see each other in San Francisco in November. And
I hope so.
And I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, always. It's always a pleasure, Phil. You're a fun guy to be interviewed by, I gotta say.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much.
All right, chat later.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate. Only the unloved hate. The unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery. Fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Of course, it's that time of the show where we've got to start wrapping things up, and I got to do this a little quicker than maybe I want to. Normally, I'm really busy month. It's really weird for my business for Christmas, New Year's, like even December 15th, 18th through the end of the year. Almost nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody will return my calls. They don't want to talk about their financial plans. It's the holidays. They're doing things. With the exception of some people that have something that has to be absolutely done that day because it's the end of the year. One of the funnier things, I had an email from somebody on Saturday the 30th, and they wanted to know if they could put money in before the end of the year into one of their accounts. And the short answer was no, because the 30th is Saturday, the 31st is Sunday, markets are closed, brokerage firms don't take money, money doesn't move during Saturday and Sunday, and the 29th, Saturday, was actually the end of the year. So if you see any numbers that are reported based on 12/31 of 17, that's a convention, but they're actually from 12/29 of 17, the end of the last business day of the year, I guess. On iTunes, I have a review, nice and short and sweet, and it simply says, I love everything about this. Good money advice, good life planning, funny and interesting stories. Great guy. Wow, that's so beautiful. I'm touched. Thank you so much for that very, very kind review. And of course, people keep sharing the show, which stuns me because I'm just fucking around, hopefully giving some information and educational stuff for people that they can do a little bit better with their investments. The fact that people actually like the show is, I don't know, almost kind of surprising, but I'm very honored and delighted that you share the show. And over at Stitcher, the show as of today is ranked 31 in the category of spirituality and religion, which cracks me up because almost half of the top 10 or 12 shows are atheistic, just straight up atheism, secularism, stuff like that. So I'm honored to be even kind of close to that ballpark over there. I think that right after late December around Christmas is kind of weird because people change their listening habits to podcasts, but I think the show spiked at 22 on that ranking, and I think a lot of that was driven from the double Bitcoin show. So people were listening to 2 podcasts instead of 1, and of course, it doesn't hurt that everyone came over from the Thinking Atheist podcast, which is much higher on this list. So the big winners, by the way, Scathing Atheist, Oh No, Ross and Carrie, The Thinking Atheist, Atheist Experience. Let's see what else is here. Dogma Debate, David Smalley, good friend of mine up there. Thank God I'm an Atheist. And just a few more down is the Phil Ferguson Show. So it is absolutely stunning to me that the show does as well as it does. And I am eternally thankful to all of you who listen and grateful that you enjoy the show and share the show. And of course, it's even nicer if you can go and leave a comment. And over at Stitcher, there are 2 relatively new comments. I think I skipped this last week because the show was too long. This one is from Buffalo. Phil is the best is the title. Well, it's very, very humbling. It won't build into my ego at all. Love you, Phil. Perfect combo of finance and amazing atheist discussion. I look forward to this podcast every week. Keep the index fund teachings coming and keep the religious on their tap dancing, fabricating toes. Thank you, Buffalo. And one more from the Peacock. Phil shares his experience and well-researched, this is me jumping in, not their quote, well-researched except for the tax shit. Fuck that up. Okay. Well-researched but concise insights into investment options and always includes plenty of memorable tips on what to look for and what to look out for, including critiques of investments that make more sense for a broker's personal bottom line instead of the individual investor. I appreciate the mix of easy learning to increase my financial literacy, along with Phil's secular take on timely topics. Whew. Oh, gosh, it's so much. So you got to focus to read out loud. It's a good trick. So that's a couple reviews on Stitcher. Doing great there. Keep slowly, gradually climbing the chart up and down, of course, but the show keeps getting bigger. And again, thank you very much. American Atheist. Where is that page? Where is that? Okay. As of last week, we had about 84 people signed up. As of this week, it's 111, 122, 130, 133 people out of the 200 that are allowed, 133 in 15 days. So if you're going to take advantage of this offer, if it's anything close to this rate, you've only got a couple of weeks. It's not going to make it to the end of February, because once 200 people take advantage of this, I'm done. The longest it will go is to the end of February, but once 200 people sign up, it's done. Oh, and look at this. I got this new chart that they've been so kind to send me. Some people have actually donated money on top of what I'm spending, an extra $422 in donations. Of course, you at any time can go to atheists.org/Phil and donate money. And that way the show gets credit for it, because people all the time ask me, how can I pay you for this advice? Or where's your Patreon? I don't have one. I don't want your money. I don't need your money. But I do want you to go donate to something to make a difference. And right now the promotion is for American Atheists, atheists.org. If you go to atheists.org/Phil and you're a new member, you can sign up for membership for $5. And I, Phil Ferguson, via Polaris Financial Planning, I will pay the extra $30. So you get your first year's membership for $5. $5 only. Hard limit 200 people. I will be, if I meet this, and it looks like we're going to, I will be out $6,000. And it's part of my way to pay back the community and to thank all of the people who listen to the show and who have hired me over the years. I greatly appreciate it. And with that, I'll wrap up. I do hope to see you in person in Oklahoma City for the American Atheist Conference. Until then, ciao. What's that? You're still here? Well, for those who hung out for an extra minute or two, I have a special treat for you. As previously discussed, I'm listening to Star Trek The Next Generation, the entire thing in Italian, and the audio clip you are about to hear is from Jean-Luc Picard, and his famous quote after he was abducted by the Borg and became a Borg, and then addressed his crewmates back on the Enterprise. And what he says in this clip is, I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile. Your life, as it has been, is over. From this time forward, you will service us. I hope you enjoy.
Io sono Locutus dei Borg. La resistenza è inutile. La vostra vita, come è stata, è finita. Da questo momento in avanti, voi sarete al nostro servizio.